Welcome, friends. How's it going? Dragon Brood and everybody from Dev's neighborhood, because we have
Hello,
guests here today. So, yeah,
it's me.
if y'all didn't see it, we did another video that's all about the overrated cards in Aetherdrift. But now we're going to talk about some of our favorite underrated cards. So this will be what we like to call the more positive spin
Right.
on things we just think people may have overlooked, and we'll talk about them and why you might should play them. Because these also tend to be a little bit cheaper than some of the other cards in our
Yeah.
overrated.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Overhyped cards tend to be crazy expensive. These you can get for a song. So, yeah, I actually feel like there's a fair number of underrated cards in the set because a
Oh, I
lot of
think there's a
people,
lot.
yeah, a lot of people were like, "Oh, I hate this set," and they just they didn't really like pay much attention to previews, or they had they got a bad taste in their mouth from the set. And I think it has painted a lot of people's perceptions of some of these cards.
I
I
think
think
so too.
there's
I think we easily, if we wanted to, probably could have done a top 20 list each
yeah,
and maybe only shared like 7 or 8 cards on those lists.
yep. Agreed, man. Yeah, I like doing it. This is like my favorite video you and I do together every season because I feel like when we do the overrated cards, we got to put the spike hat on, we got to put our
Yep.
suits on, and be serious people. But for this, we kind of get to put our pajamas on and hang out, be a little bit looser. These are cards we like that you might not know about, and that's the videos I like to do. So
Yeah, also, this is early in the season, so I want to remind people you can also support the channel by being a member down below if you haven't clicked those. We let you get input on content here on the channel and what we do. We also make some extra videos just for members. And if you want deck help, especially early in the season, we're trying to figure out how to make your decks better. I have a level where you can get that sent right to your email box. So check
nice,
that out too. But yeah,
good
this
stuff.
is going to be a fun video. I think we're going to have a lot of different cards to talk about, and I'm ready to get to it, Dev. So what's your number
Okay.
5?
My number 5 is the only uncommon on my list. I feel like usually these underrated lists are populated with commons and uncommons people may not have heard of, but I've only got one this time
I
around.
don't
And
even have one this time. Mine, I think,
oh
mono rare
wow,
and mythics.
man. Okay, well in that case, this guy's got to represent all of the lower rarities for the entire video. We got Gloryheath Lynx here. This is a
Ooh.
2 mana. It's 1 and a white for a 2/3 cat mount with lifelink. It saddles for 2. And whenever it attacks while saddled, search your library for a basic plains, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. When this gives you the first plains, it is a very good card. When it gives you the second plains, it's wild. Like, it's a really good card when it draws you the second plains. But apart from that, 2 mana, 2/3 lifelink with a cat creature type. You know what I mean? And like it can go in the mounts deck as well. I think it's okay in mounts, but I think it's best in cats because cats has a 2 mana 1/1 in the 2-drop slot and another 2 mana 1/1 in the 2-drop slot. Helpful Hunter and like Sky Knight Sovereign, I think it's called, or Sky Knight Legionnaire. Either
No,
way,
yeah.
yeah. But it needs some like not necessarily beefy, but at least like some creatures that can block aggro in the 2-drop slot. And this blocks aggro super well, incredibly well. I just like everything about it, dude. I think it's got an unembarrassing, rate to the power toughness. Lifelink is an incredibly good ability on a small creature right now. Decent creature type in the cat's deck, saddles for relatively little, and get you card advantage while thinning your deck. What is not to like about this guy?
Dude, this was one of the early uncommons that when it got previewed, I just went, this is the type of card that doesn't look like it does a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but it does just enough of everything it's trying to do. You know
Yes,
what I
it
mean?
does.
Like, you might need it to be a sizable cat. You might need it to be a life linker in the life gain deck, right?
Yep.
You might need it to ramp in your mount deck so you could play some bigger vehicles or something, right? It's doing just enough of each of the little things that it could find a home in a couple of spots, right?
Yeah.
It's not crazy to just be a 2/3 for 2 with lifelink and upside.
Yeah, that's kind
Right?
of okay. You're right there, just by itself. The upside here is an upside we've seen before. Often we see these 2 mana white creatures that go and get a plains when they enter the battlefield. And those can see play from time. Frontier Seeker is a good example, a card that's seen like sparing play in its standard environment. This does not do it ETB, but I do like that it doesn't have to actually hit. It's just attacks while saddled. That's kind of nice.
Yeah.
And you don't have to saddle it to attack or block. It's not like a vehicle. Like this just can sit there and dare aggro to swing and kind of brick wall them. And I don't know, once you get your aura bow or some other, cat anthem effect, like a patchwork banner in play, yeah, 3/4 lifelinker. That's a serious creature, So
Well, here's an interesting thing to think about. It makes it easier to play the 5 cost banner.
That is actually kind of a good point because it's getting you the planes, it's getting you the drops to
Yeah.
get to the 5-drop banner. Yeah.
I mean, if you do like say turn 1 Savannah Lions because it's a 2/1, turn 2 Gloryheath Lynx, even on turn 3 if you can't attack effectively with Savannah Lions, you're like, "Great, I'll just use that to saddle this, attack, possibly trade, maybe not." Again, like you said, you could have played the patchwork banner or whatever. Maybe you get a trade, you get a planes, and now you're ready to play your 5-cost banner next turn. Like, that's not that unreal.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Like this can attack on turn 3 before you've played your land drop and get you your land drop for turn
Yeah.
3. That seems really good. And again, thinning your deck in aggro. Like you said, Cats has a 1-drop that can crew this. I know there's a fair number of Savannah Lions like creatures in standard right now, but worth noting that Cats specifically has a 2-power 1-drop to crew this. So I don't know, man. I'm kind of into it. I think it's a role player more than anything else, but it's probably a card that is just like not on anyone's radar. But I think it's okay.
Here's another low key thing about it.
Hmm.
If you're worried about discard decks, it does put another card in your hand.
Yes, it does. A card that you don't really mind discarding either.
Yeah.
Get rid of a planes.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't do anything spectacular. It's just doing just enough of each of the things it does.
Yep.
And they're useful in a few different spots.
It's like a good partner in a relationship, It's just
Yeah,
all the
exactly.
little things, you know what I mean?
Yep.
But
if you were on a basketball or football team, you'd be the glue guy, right? Like
right.
the
This
guy
is
that's helping you get through the mid game, keeps everybody rallied up and
Nope.
and spirits high. Like it's that card.
It's like this is your Tony Kukoc.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? But
You're not going to show up high on the stat sheet, but you'll be right there in the middle, getting 2 or 3 things in the box score, helping us get a win.
Exactly. This is your Stockton. A few assists. It's going to feel good. So, but yeah, it's not going to be Jordan, but it is a role player. But what do you have? Especially knowing that your list is all rares. I want to know what bombs
I'm
are
sure
on
there's
this
so many
thing.
people going like, "What is this sports ball they're talking about?" But, all right, my number 5. This one's a fun one, but it's Captain Howler Sea Scourge. It's a blue and a red for a 5/4 legendary shark pirate, which is when I saw that, I'm like, man, that's an awesome type line.
Yeah,
It's
they
a
went off
shark
with
pirate.
some of the types in this set.
Love it. It has ward of 2 and pay 2 life. So love that, right? Super hard to kill. So you got to have mana and extra life. And it's already going to be in likely some type of aggro decks anyway. So that 2 life is a big deal. And then whenever you discard 1 or more cards, target creature gets +2/+0 to end a turn for each card discarded this way. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player this turn, you also get to draw a card.
Pretty gross.
Yep. I like everything this card's doing.
More or less.
One, it's a 5/4 for 4 with an upside that's hard to deal with. We already know one of the blue-red themes in the deck is drawing and discarding. Yep. So if you're just doing what the deck does, you might actually have 2 or 3 things that like, all right, when this attacks, draw and discard. When you pay X, discard some cards, draw some cards, whatever, right? Hell, we have a monument that when you discard, you draw, get abilities, whatever.
Yeah, that thing's cool.
You could do a lot with this. And the fact that it's +2/+0, not +1, and for each card. I mean, there are some turns where if like one thing gets through, you could just dome your opponent for like 8. Just like, oh, that got through. Great. I'm going to pay 4, discard these cards, draw these cards. You're dead. Right. Pretty sweet card. And honestly, you can pick these things up for like $1 or $2 on a lot of sites right now.
Yeah, these are relatively cheap right now. Even though I've heard some buzz about it, I have not heard that much. Often when people mention this card, other people will immediately shut them down. Like, it doesn't have any keyword abilities. And it's like, who cares? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This has just as an enchantment in a way, right? You don't have to swing with it. It can have significance the turn it comes into play, which I think is really neat.
Big body for 4 mana in a deck that's already going to be filtering its hands to have the better cards.
Yeah.
Because it's constantly drawing and discarding as part of the theme of those colors in Aetherdrift. So I'm like,
cute. We pointed this out the other day that notice this is not the only card in the set that likes wheel effects. Mm-hmm. Isn't it cute that the racing set likes wheels? Isn't that adorable from a design perspective? Yep. Usually this card would say, I feel like in the last like 10 years, this card would have been designed in such a way that it would not usually say for each card.
Yeah.
It would usually say whenever you discard 1 or more cards, the creature gets +2/+0, and that's it. For each card is wild. That's actually extremely good.
I would not be surprised to see this become a popular commander, honestly.
Oh, yeah,
like,
dude.
Turn 4, and you have a bunch of stuff that draws and discards, like, You
Yep.
have one flyer or one thing with trample. Like,
You
all
can
right,
end somebody's game, dude.
yeah,
Like,
for sure.
but even in standard, we have like little stuff like Elder Dragon War that wheels Brass's Tunnel, whatever it's called, Tunnel Grinder. But things like, Guardian of New Benalia, that lets you discard as many cards as you want to, anytime you want to. So that could be an aggressive piece with this. There's just a lot of stuff that discards
Side
cards in
note too,
standard.
this artwork also solved a very interesting problem: is how would a shark wear a cloak when you have a fin? I'm just saying, like that's a real thing.
It wears
Like
it kind of under the back of his
exactly,
fin.
it
Yeah.
clips around the neck and goes under the fins. Like,
It's been freaking me out that the sharks in this set have legs, like at all. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
that is
Like,
a little weird.
I
But I
want their
mean, we
bodies
kind
to
of had that
terminate
in
in the
comics.
fin.
What was it? Mako, I think, is the character that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like,
But it's bugging me. But yeah, all things considered, just 4 mana, 5/4. I like the ward abilities a lot. Like, it's a solid creature. I'm surprised I'm not hearing more about it too.
But yeah, what's your number 4?
I will let you know. Okay, number 4 is Thunderous Velocipede, another card I haven't
Ooh.
really heard much about. This is going about $5 right now, but I think that has a lot to do with the fact that it's a mythic on pre-order. This is 3
Yeah.
mana, 1 and 2 green for a 5/5 vehicle with trample and it crews for 3. Each other vehicle you and creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on if its mana value is 4 or less. Otherwise, it enters with 3 additional +1/+1 counters. I have seen some confusion about this. Large creatures get even larger. Large creatures get the 3 counters. Smallish creatures get the 1 counter. But I still think that this is kind of phenomenal, kind of a tribute to the World Tree that is on a 5/5 body. Like a 3 mana 5/5 trample is like we're kind of getting there. You add in the sweeper protection, the protection from lay down arms, and other sorcery speed removal. It's relatively easy to crew, but even if you never cruise, it's just going to sit on the table and make every dude you play for the rest of the game bigger. And I don't know why this isn't seeing like any attention whatsoever.
Yeah, there were 2 things on this card I noticed. The first was kind of the same thing you were pointing out, is that for whatever reason, big creatures get even bigger.
Yeah, it
I
should be the
almost
other way around.
Yeah, I almost felt like maybe that was misworded or somebody mistyped
Yeah,
it when they put it into the file and they just kind of went, well, let's just see what happens. Because usually you're right. It's the small creatures get more counters, the bigger creatures get fewer counters or get you another effect.
yeah. I think this
Right?
is to keep you from having a bunch of 1 mana 4/4s in your deck.
Maybe.
Like Lawn War Elves is a 4/4 now. I think they wanted to stay off that, but I think that would have been fine, honestly.
I mean, but what I do like about this card is it works also in the +1/+1 counter decks, right? There's a fair amount of those we've seen over the last couple of sets that are real close to making a push through standard. So
Yes,
this
they
could be the
are.
type of card. It survives sweepers, except for the one new sweeper, because it gets rid of
Yeah,
vehicles
yeah.
or
The
whatever.
pile
But
up. Yeah.
yeah, and the other interesting thing is you're gonna have a pretty easy time crewing this because everything gets a counter.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, I was
Like,
going to bring that up too. It's like things get larger anyway, so crewing this is easier than it seems. It's
yeah,
actually crew.
so crew of
It's
3
kind
is
of
like,
crew 2.
all right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. I know that we have like Pugnacious Hammer Skull, right? A 3 mana 6/6. We just got that new Dino Anthem. He's a 3 mana 5/4. All your other dinosaurs get
Yeah.
+1/+1. So it's not like this is the only like big stats 3-drop in green right now, but I think that it's got more value, more potential value in more sort of generic decks than some of those other 3-drops. The other cards I just named are just dinosaurs cards. This can see play in like anything. So
I'd be curious to see if this type of card could fit in like Delirium as an example,
oh
right?
yeah,
Because you
yeah.
have a fair amount of 3-4 power things.
Yeah.
So like
Like
maybe,
that 1-drop 3/3 that can't attack until you have delirium. Like that could crew this before it can
yeah,
even attack. Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like, but even if you just play this, like, does mono red not like attacking into a 5/5?
It
Right?
usually
Like,
doesn't.
you're like, I'll crew and block with this thing, and maybe we trade, but hey, I didn't take a bajillion damage.
Yeah.
Right? So that has a use. So yeah, I don't. This is one of those cards, along, like we're saying with the big dinosaur in the set and some other things. They're like, is this Wizards' way of saying like, hey, we want mono green, we want traditional Gruul
Yeah.
or green white aggro or whatever to be a thing, right? So we're going to give you a few more tools in the form of some of these vehicles that are almost like enchantments that sometimes are
Yeah.
also creatures.
Yeah, that's what I like about it. I kind of said that about the shark guy too, is that it kind of acts like an enchantment. Like it doesn't have to attack or do anything to get your real value. It just sits there and has this passive thing that's really good. And this card's much the same way, man. If you untap with it on the next turn, which should be easy enough to do, unless they have specifically a shatter effect, it should be easy to untap. And you like play 2 guys and they get like reasonably large. I think it's okay.
Yeah, making
But
everything bigger. I mean, like
what's wrong with
it
that?
can only be so bad, right?
Yeah. And we have multiple effects now in standard that, if a card would get a +1/+1 counter, it instead gets more +1/+1 counters. So like you could really, juice the, how good this can be.
Oh yeah.
But I am interested in your numero trace. What's it going to be?
This is probably, of all the cards on my list, what I would say is the most basic.
Oh,
And people seem to slowly be getting onto this card because it looks like the price has ticked up a little bit in some places and it's now around $10.
oh, wow.
But Burnout Bashtronaut. It is a
Oh, this
1
guy.
red, 1/1. It's a goblin warrior, so it does fit in goblins and whatever potentially. It does have menace. It starts your engines, which is what you want on turn 1. Fantastic. And then 2 abilities of you can pay 2. This creature gets +1/+0 to end a turn. And if you have max speed, it gets double strike. I like this card a lot for the decks that need it. Now, again, I don't think you're going to play it in most goblin decks unless there's 2 or 3 goblins you want to fit in that happen to have start your engines, whatever, care about max speed. But realistically, this is for the speed deck, right?
Yeah.
You have a couple of cards. I think there's a black one as well that might be 1 mana that start your engines. Boom, we're getting going immediately.
Turn
This also
1.
has menace. So if you're on the play, there's a real chance your opponent's not going to be able to block it.
Yep.
So you're realistically getting to punch unless they waste a removal on it. And then once you have double strike, like, okay, cool. Now I'll just spend extra mana.
Yep.
Right? Like, and this thing gets bigger. It's just an all-around quality card.
Yeah, once you do have max speed, you can only just fire breathe once with this guy, and he's dealing 4 damage.
Yeah.
And that's like pretty good. He also trades up in combat pretty easily because of that fire breathing ability. He's one of, I think that we actually just saw one today, last day of previews. But he was like basically the only card that can reliably get you 2 speed on turn 2. Because you play him on, like you were saying, you play him on 1, start your engines, that's a speed. Turn 2, if you're on the play, it's very likely they didn't play 2 creatures, so he gets through. So this guy can increase your speed faster than more or less any creature in standard. And I think that is one of the more noteworthy things about the card.
Yeah, really cool. Like I said, it's a real clean and simple design to help solve the problem that deck is going to have.
Yeah. We got to get speed and we got to do it quickly. So how do we do that? And again, we've gotten a couple of cards that help get speed fast, and especially the untapped, like colorless lands that start your engines. Like there's some good stuff in there, but ultimately you don't often want to, unless you go like, I guess you can go like turn 1 untapped colorless land with start your engines into Ginger Brute and attack immediately and get 2 speed on turn 1.
That's true.
That's probably the fastest way to do it. But this guy, on the other hand, is, the other fastest way to do it. And I think both of those plays will matter in the speed deck. So yeah, I think he's just like a guaranteed 4 of in those decks, but I've been surprised that I haven't really seen much talk about him either.
Yeah, like I said, I think people maybe overlooked it a little bit, but I've seen the prices like tick up a little and a little and a little.
The Scryfall says $14 here, but like I could swear the last time I looked at this card, it was like $4.
Well, there you go. So
yeah, I guess people are starting to catch on.
Yeah, if you're going to play it, I think the deck's going to have to lean heavily on probably like at least 8 1-drops, probably 8 to 10 2-drops, just to make sure you can start your engines on those first couple turns.
Yep.
And I think this is the way to do it.
I guess I just wish it had a different name. I'm cool for silliness. I'm cool. For some reason, Bastronaut just doesn't do it for me. I feel like they were hitting the pipe hard when they named this card, dude.
The only problem I have with it is we know there's a space set down the road. I would have saved it for that set. Which,
that's probably
to be fair,
true.
This could have been a design for that set that got moved over to the set, and then they just added the start your engines to it or something. So who knows?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Could have been that.
So you never know. Stuff like that happens all the time when they're making sets.
Yeah.
But all right, what are we up to on your number 3 here?
My number 3 is Possession Engine, which I did not like at first. Like I really didn't like this card at first, but like the more I think about it, the more I like it. 5 mana, 3 and 2 blue for a 5/5 vehicle with crew 3. When it enters, gain control of target creature an opponent controls for as long as you control this vehicle. All right, that's good. This creature can't attack or block, or that creature that you stole cannot attack or block for as long as you control this vehicle. So that's what made me hate this card. It's like, oh, okay, so I steal it from him and it just sits there like a grapefruit on the table. Nobody's eating it, But the more I think about it, the more I think, okay, what the creature you stole actually does in this case is crew this guy. And
Mm-hmm.
half the time you're going to be stealing, a 3-4 power creature, and you're technically kind of upgrading the creature you stole to a 5-5. It's also a little bit harder to kill than, say, an aura would be or a creature would be that steals a creature, right? There have been a few times over the last couple of months in the arena where somebody has just sprung some sort of control magic effect on me. And it just like blows me out. So
Yeah.
I already feel like people aren't playing enough of these like thief cards. Because they tend to be really good in formats where, you're relying on a 6/6 flyer to finish the game for you. Just steal that. You know what I mean? But yeah, I hated this at first because I thought, oh, the creature you steal is now useless. Actually, the creature you steal has a lot of uses. You can crew
Well,
the
it has
vehicle,
the
attack
specific
for
use.
5,
Yeah.
like not, a preacher of the schism's good to attack with. But a creature of this, well, I guess a preacher of the schism, you'd have to increase its power. It's not the best
Yeah.
deal. But okay, you stole Glissa. Okay, the good news is they're not attacking you with Glissa anymore. And just because you can't attack with Glissa, well, you can attack with a 5/5. You know what I mean? Like you can steal their Sheldred, and you don't really want to run Sheldred into combat very often anyway. So you can just have Sheldred sit there, gain you life, deal damage to them while it crews this thing. And like altogether, dude, I think this is a fairly powerful, steal effect.
I think overall it's a really cool thematically designed card.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, I
Like
like the
even the
flavor.
artwork has like the spirits driving the car and like
You stealing that shark.
yeah, I think it's really cool. Just like the idea of all right, it's taken a spirit, from a creature, and that's what's driving the vehicle. And I'm like, because there's not a lot of ways you can thematically design stuff sometimes, but this feels like they got it exactly right. Like
Yeah,
what it needs to look like. It's a sizable card, so it's at least worth playing. Because like if this was just like a 3/3 or vehicle or
right,
something, like nobody would
right.
care. Right? Like you're not gonna play it, it's never gonna attack. So now you just have this other thing sitting here. Might as well be a control magic or whatever at that point. But you get a 5/5 out of it, which makes it extremely playable by comparison. If there's the only downside to this, realistically, is that we'll probably be playing in an environment where there's going to be more artifact removal being played just because of all the vehicles.
Yeah, right.
So combat gets a little tricky because you're like, well, if they kill this, now they get their thing back and then possibly get to block and it gets a little weird. But
Yeah.
overall, the card ability itself is really cool.
Yep. Yeah, I don't really love the mana cost. I don't like that it costs as much
Sure.
as it does, but ultimately, yeah, I think that it's a little bit of overlooking here. I'm surprised the card is currently like $5.50 to order. That's a little more than I would have assumed,
Yeah,
but
that's the thing that got
you
me
know,
too. I did not think it was going to be nearly that popular. I'm like, oh yeah, this would be like a $2 or $3 rare.
yeah,
Like,
same. Apparently somebody beyond us sees how good it could be. But what are we on here? Number 3 for you?
Yeah.
All right.
This one's one, and when I previewed it, I was kind of on the fence, and I've come around to this card's really nuts, and I'm going to lose to it at some point. So that's how I go. Yeah, it's probably being underrated a little bit, but it does go for about a $10 price tag right now, and it's March of the World Ooze.
Oh,
3
this
green,
thing.
green,
Yeah.
green. It's a 6 mana enchantment. Creatures you control have base power and toughness 6/6 and are oozes in addition to their other types. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if it's not their turn, you create a 3/3 green elephant creature token. So, first off, obviously in Commander, this card's good, right?
Wow.
Like anybody plays anything on anyone else's turn, you're getting a 3/3 elephant, which is actually a 6/6 because you have
6/6.
the
Yeah.
March of the
Yeah.
World Ooze, right?
Ridiculous.
So great card in that regard. But even in 1v1, this is like I guess the only issue I had with this is we're not even really playing Overrun that much right now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So Overrun's 5 mana, it gives everything +3/+3 and trample. But this has the upside of just working forever. Right? You put it down for 1 more mana, you get a constant string of elephants. Even if it dies, you're at least left with some number of 3/3s a lot of the time. But I was thinking about imagine if somebody's just doing this with like elves or whatever, right? You get to where you've got 4 or 5 creatures out, and then you just tap your 1 elf and like, all right, and everything's 6/6 on top of being +2/+2.
Hmm.
I assume I'm dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't know what else is gonna happen there.
I just did the thing where I speed run like rating every single card in the set in one stream. And when I got to this card, I talked about it for a second, and one person in chat mentioned that. Like, what if you just put it in elves? And I had not thought about that. And I think that's a pretty good call. The different, I guess, like Banner of Kinship is a card you could be playing in Elves apart from this, or
Sure.
instead of this. Um, there's a couple. There's Overrun, like you said, Overrun in Elves is ridiculous.
Yeah, and see, and that's the
This
thing too, right? Banner of Kinship is better than this if you already have, let's say, realistically, like 5 other creatures. So
right, but
everything is a minimum of 6/6, right?
but it requires you to have that, right?
Yeah.
And this
Whereas this
doesn't.
is like, all right, maybe I don't want to overcommit to the board. So I don't want to play like 6 elves or whatever out. I just want to get a couple. I already have like an archdruid. Let me go ahead and just play this. So my other 3 elves are 6/6s, and then we'll just see what happens. Right.
Yeah,
So that we're not worried about your whole board getting wiped out. And then you can just keep building on that, which I think makes it a cool card. Now, I think the decks are going to play it again outside of Commander. You're probably only going to put like 2 copies in your deck,
yeah.
but a pretty cool card overall.
Neat card. I don't really want to be burned by like Rite of the Dragon Caller again. You know what I mean? Like a 6 mana enchantment that does wild stuff, and I want to
Sure.
play it. You know what I mean? But that said, one thing I do like about this, by the way, just I feel like no one said this the whole time I've been looking at people talking about this card. Let's say your opponent really wants to remove one of your creatures on your turn. Well, they're removing a 6/6 with a go for the throat. They're also giving you a 6/6. So like it invalidates any removal that would be played on your turn by
Yeah.
replacing the creature with the same power toughness creature, which I think is kind of neat.
I think that's a big
You
upside.
know,
Like forcing your
huge.
opponent to play at sorcery speed is a big
Everything at
deal.
sorcery speed. That's
Yeah.
good. But does it cost 6 mana? You know what I mean? To like force your opponent to do that. This is, kind of expensive, 10, $11, but I'm pretty sure it's mostly because of commander hype.
Oh, sure. Sure.
In standard, I want to believe, let me just put it that way. If you can use a bunch of elves to ramp this into play and now all your Larrys are like 6/6s, that sounds good. So I am interested. I'm interested in that prospect. I'll say that much. Yes.
Yeah. Wild card. Well, what is sitting in your number 3 slots?
I think I'm at my number 2
Oh,
now.
we are on your number 2. Yeah,
Yeah, we've been blasting through this one, man.
we are.
Number 2, I should have gone ahead and written it here, is Fearless Swashbuckler. Is
Oh,
what
yeah,
this
yeah.
guy is. Yeah, you had your Is It Pirate? I'll have an Is It Pirate of my own. This is 3 mana, 1 a blue and a red for a 3/3 fish pirate with haste. Vehicles you control have haste. That's a good line of text. And whenever you attack, if a pirate and a vehicle attacked this combat, draw 3, discard 2. Wild ability, dude. Wild ability. Doesn't have to deal combat damage, it's an attacks trigger. Obviously the line here is, turn 1, any 1 drop, probably Spyglass Siren. Turn 2 vehicle, probably Subterranean Schooner or something. Turn 3 this, and now the Schooner and this can swing on 3, and on turn 3 you are swinging 6, and drawing 3 cards. Doesn't matter that you have to let go of 2 cards. And by the way, this works with the legend that you pointed out because
Yep.
you're discarding 2
You
cards.
just play that the next turn.
Yep. On curve, that's wild, But I don't think it's actually super hard at all to get a vehicle swinging on turn 3 along with this. And if you can do it, if you can get these 3 cards, if you can literally tap and activate a Bazaar of Baghdad on turn 3 when you play this, I think that it did a really good job. Like,
Oh, yeah.
honestly, and at the floor, it's a 3/3 haste for 3, and like, okay. I haven't even talked about that. The vehicles you control have haste line of text, which is just wild in and of itself. Like, just that line is pretty good. So I don't know, dude. I kind of like this a lot.
Yeah, I think this is, again, coming back to the whole blue red mechanic in the set, is that drawing 3 and discarding 2 enables a lot of things, both for cards that care about your drawing cards and stuff that cares about your discarding cards. But I mean, like you're saying, if you play the 5/4 right after this, okay, well, now you're attacking with 2 or 3 things, and something's getting at least a +4 if you have
Or
nothing else that's triggering,
yep.
right?
Yeah, I mean, and you drew right. You discarded 2, so that's a +4. But maybe you drew into more stuff that lets you discard things or whatever. You know what I mean? So
Also, I
it
want to
could
point out for
it could
these decks,
snowball.
cycling makes you discard.
Yep.
Like
Cycling is discarding a card.
that's a real thing. So
Yep.
when people say, I don't know, this seems too gimmicky, I'm like, there's a lot of cards that are good that happen to also cycle that you could play.
Yep. So many, dude. They printed a lot of cards in this set that cost like 1 mana of a color to cycle, and the card itself is halfway decent. And like those, I mean, we're not going to see like a Zenith Flare deck in standard again anytime soon because we didn't get a Zenith Flare effect. But I think you could do like a pretty decent little cycling deck with decks that care about discard or reanimator.
I
And
do
just
have a fault with this card type though.
Oh yeah,
That
yeah, fish pirate.
why do some things we break down into subgenres and others we don't? Like, why is this a fish and not a shark or a merfolk?
Yeah, right. Well, I
Right?
guess is a shark a fish? I guess it is.
Yeah, that's what
Dolphins
I'm saying.
dolphins aren't fish, but I guess sharks are.
So I'm just like, why is this not a shark or whatever? Now, admittedly,
Right.
in the artwork, he's kind of like a
He's a
some
swordfish.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's
He's
like
actually he's actually tri-wielding when you think about it, because he's got like a
yeah,
sword in his
exactly.
mouth, and a sword in his hand, and a sword on his face. So like the guy
Maybe that's why he
actually
gets three
really dangerous.
abilities.
Right. That's why he draws 3 cards right there.
But I will say this though, if you do want to play it in some type of pirate deck, this is actually pretty cool because it does have haste, and the pirate deck doesn't
Right.
have a lot of things with haste. So
Yep.
if you're trying to still have a board built up after a sweeper or something like that, like this card could fill that void a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, if
Yeah,
this card didn't have haste, I wouldn't pay any attention to it. But Pirates needs, relatively low on the curve, efficient cards that add up the damage as quickly as possible. And the fact that this has haste allows it to do that pretty efficiently while still like getting you through your deck, dude. Drawing 3 cards is ludicrous. I don't care that you have to discard 2. Seeing 3 cards is crazy on turn 3. While still, it's not even like, oh, I cast a spell and what the spell does is draw 3, discard 2. That would be okay, right?
yeah.
But no, this actually puts a guy on the table too. Like actually pretty good tempo, I think here.
Yeah, I think it's
But
going to be interesting to figure out what these decks look like, right? Because we've
yeah,
already mentioned
what they
2
actually
cards
do.
for them, and we're like, oh, but it could be kind of partly like a pirate's deck. It's like, okay, should it be leaning more on vehicles instead, or do you just play them as what they are, and we just care about things that let us draw and discard things? You
Right,
know, like
right. We just play that kind of deck.
yeah, a bunch of cycling cards or something. Like I don't
Right.
really know at this point, and this is why we talk about overrated, underrated stuff. It becomes a little hard to speculate because we don't really know what's going to happen. You can go back through the history of Magic. There are cards that had great words on them that we thought were going to be a thing, but the metagame just never lined up to give those cards
Yeah,
a
all
chance.
depends on the context and the
Mhm.
meta, like you said. It really does.
So
But
yeah, we'll
it
see.
even though it can be hard to tell, like I guess like with your 4 mana pirate and now with my 3 mana pirate, these are both cards that I'm just really surprised no one is talking about. And those are the cards that are kind of most likely to make my list, at least.
Yeah, they're
It's
perfect
like,
for this list. Honestly, this is why.
huh.
Like, what can we do with this card that people may not have considered yet?
Yeah, exactly. Like let's think a little bit more outside the box or just continue thinking about it for longer than a few seconds. There's actually a lot of play on both of these pirates. But what is your number 2?
Okay, my number 2 kind of breaks the rules a little bit here for underrated.
Oh, okay.
I think this card, while it is going for $12 to $15 in a lot of places, I think it probably could be even more expensive than that because of Commander and whatnot. And I don't
Mm.
think people have really processed everything we could do with it in Standard. And I'm talking about Sab-Sunen Luxa Embodied.
Oh, dude, I love this card so much. Yes, this card is phenomenal. Yeah, agreed. 100%. Yes.
Yeah, this
Yes.
is 3 green blue. So it is 5 mana. It's a god. So, you have to trigger some things. But it's a 6/6. It has reach, trample, indestructible. So good, great set of keywords.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
It can't attack or block unless it has an even number of counters on it. But at the beginning of your first main phase, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Then, if it has an odd numbers of counters on it, you get to draw 2 cards. There's a lot going on with this. Like, okay, first off, it starts out as a 6/6, but depending on when you play it, it might still be able to block on your turn because you could play it after your first main phase. So, I guess technically it has no counters on it. So 0 is even,
Right.
which it
So
shows
it
on the thing.
can block the turn it comes into play if you
Yeah,
don't put any counters on it.
which is a
Yeah.
rarity for the god cards.
Yeah.
First off, right? They usually
Really.
don't do anything until you met some other parameter. Then the next turn, it's going to be a 7/7 that can't attack or block, but then you get 2 cards automatically. So you get a 6/6, and then as a bonus, the next turn you get 2 cards. But if you have anything that can control counters, put a +1/+1 on a card. Like we talked about, Collector's Cage puts a counter on a thing.
Yep.
A bunch of different cards. Let you
So many ways to do it. Yeah. Countless. Right.
also. Here's an amusing thing: if you are okay not drawing cards, if you have any of the cards that say when you put a counter, put an additional counter, it just keeps getting bigger and you can just fight with it, which is hilarious. So there's a bunch of different things you can do with this, but just having cards on tap, 2 extra cards on tap. So basically, you're looking at 3 new cards that next turn. Your regular draw and 2 from the +1/+1 counter.
Yep.
That's a lot. Honestly.
That's so much. It really is. And like it not like it did nothing when it came into play, right? Like you played it for 5 mana. That's a big investment, but that's cool because it blocked. It blocked that turn. And then it draws you 2 cards. Like the moment you untap, it draws you 2 cards. Um, and I've had a couple people tell me in like comments and on stream, like, yo, it has to wait 2 turns to attack. Well, first of all, that's only if you do things if you don't put any +1/+1 counters on it at any point. It does have to wait 2 turns. However, it draws you 2 cards. It's just an indestructible draw 2 cards every other turn, which is wild. You'll take that. But when it does finally attack, normally, again, you didn't put any extra counters on it. When it does finally attack, it attacks for like 8 or something, and that trample.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Ridiculous, huge. This seems like the kind of thing that once it's in play, your opponent absolutely must remove it, or you're going to win the game. Like I really, this seems like a ridiculous threat that must be dealt with as soon as possible. Because if you don't deal with it right now, and it has indestructible, but if you don't deal with it right now, it's going to replace itself twice within a turn.
Yeah.
It's going to draw 2 cards. And that's, again, even if you can remove it, if you can't remove it in time, they still get 1 card advantage over you because you drew 2, right? Just a nuts card that you can manipulate the counters on. You've already brought this up, but I imagine like, okay, Snakeskin Veil. There's a good choice. That can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature at instant speed. So like your opponent could think everything is fine and dandy and swing into your god that can't block. And then suddenly, whoops, Snakeskin Veil, she can block. Let's go. Oh, and she'll be able to attack next turn, by the way. So like there's all kinds of wild swings this card can give you. I love this lady so much, dude. I think I agree that she's underrated. I agree 100%. I don't care about the price. That's probably very commandery. It also has to do with the fact she's a mythic and a god and the thighs. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, yeah, I think there's a lot pushing this card's price tag, but I would say that like standard players taking it seriously is not one of those factors. So, and they need to. This card is ridiculous. I really think this card is ridiculous.
I'll also say that getting 5 mana is not that difficult in a blue-green deck.
Not in Simic.
Yeah, nope. You could definitely have this out turn 3.
Turn 3.
Not unreasonable. Yep.
Lana Werewolves on turn 1.
And again,
any ramp piece on turn 2.
You skip your first main phase. You get your second main. Like, okay, I have a 6/6. Next turn, I'm getting 2 cards. And if I have a way to put a counter on it, I got 2 cards and got to swing with effectively an 8/8.
Yep. That's something else that people aren't bringing up. You can draw the 2 cards and still swing with it that turn. Like if you put another counter on it, like it doesn't matter if you drew 2 cards. Let's say you draw 2 cards and then move to attack step and Innkeeper's Talent puts a counter on her.
Yep.
Drew 2 cards, you can attack for 1 million. Like it's crazy.
Which then means nuts, you're actually getting your cards and attacking every turn. Right? It doesn't ever have a time where it doesn't do anything. And those are all relevant regular cards you would play. I think right now, though, we look at the +1/+1 decks, and they've mostly either been mono green or green white. And we haven't had like the big enough reason to add blue or make them green blue. Yeah. Right? Now, this is a thing that you might want 2 or 3 copies of that gives you incentive to want to change over to being Simic.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, there hasn't been a good reason to play Simic, and not just this card, but I think like there's a flying Death Touch snake for 2 mana that effectively casts like explosive vegetation that's in this set. I think that's actually one of the best cards in the entire set. So Simic is looking really, really good right now, and I think people need to take this seriously.
This is wild too, because I'm just thinking with Indestructible, like, all right, turn 4, you might be smacking somebody with an 8/8.
Yeah, you might.
You know what I mean?
People have said there's so much exile in this format, but the only real card that exiles this forever is like Sunfall. Like Torch is not going to hit this.
Yeah,
Elspeth's Might not going to hit this. Anoint with Affliction's not going to hit this. There's just not much that actually exiles this. The Indestructible Clause means something.
Yeah.
Just a wild card. Last thing I'll say though is again back on Innkeeper's Talent, because there's something really cheeky you can do with an Innkeeper's Talent. If you have Innkeeper's Talent leveled up all the way, it puts 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature that would otherwise get 1 +1/+1 counter, right? You get double the counters. So you can kind of lock this into one of the modes with Innkeeper's Talent.
Yeah.
Depending on when you level up your Innkeeper's Talent, you can lock this in to draw 2 cards forever or attack forever. And I think that's neat. You know what I mean? So if you go turn 1 Llanowar Elves, turn 2 Overlord of the Hauntwoods, turn 3 Resolve this, let's say they somehow find a way to deal with this. They still have to deal with the Overlord of the Hauntwoods. Simic is looking really good, dude. And I think this card is a big part of it. So 100 agree. Like, people are not taking the Frog Lady seriously enough.
Yeah, I
And
don't know. I'm worried about it. I'm going to lose to this card.
oh yeah,
Like,
I'm gonna go the other way, dude. We're gonna win some games with this lady here. I'm taking them thighs, and I'm gonna win some games. Yeah, excellent call on this.
all right, so now we're down to our number ones. What do you got?
Numero uno, baby. All right, so I got to make sure that I've spelled her name right. I think you're supposed to pronounce this Aatchik, Emerald Radian, the Aatchik with Rob Schneider. This is 6 mana, 3 and 2 black and a green for a 3/3 legendary insect druid. Aatchik. It's a really weird spelling. Whenever she enters, create a 1/1 green insect creature token for each artifact and or creature card in your graveyard. Whenever another insect you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Aatchik. Each opponent loses 1 life. Now, we have just recently denigrated a 6 mana card that everyone loves. We did that in the other video. There's a card that people are just going crazy. And one of my big complaints against that card is, bro, it costs 6 mana. So you might think my number one would not be a 6-drop. Difference is, this can be reanimated on turn 4. And I think even on turn 4, you can get like 6 insects really easily. The thing I love most about this card, though, the thing I'm going to harp on the most, concentrate on, is that unless they have specifically Sunfall, they take a buttload of damage if they try to sweep these things off the table. Even if the sweeper hits Aatchik at the same time, they're still taking 6 shrapnel blasts worth of damage, 5 damage. And I can't tell you how many times in the last like 2 years, you're a content creator, you know this. How many times have you built one of those like Lurgoyf, Cruel Somnophages, Stick Fingers, right? There's like 4 of these guys in standard right now. Souls of the Lost is another one. How many times have you built one of those decks? And it is so easy to get a Lurgoyf to like a 12/12. Super easy.
Yeah.
So if you can reanimate this somehow, let's say you're self-milling yourself all game, and then you can reanimate with a Zombify, you can reanimate it with a Rite of the Moth that you've milled into your yard. And then when you get it back again, you put them in a situation that, like, I don't think people are thinking about this unless the sweeper they have is specifically Sunfall. Then if they kill your 8 guys, they just die. Like, they cannot use a sweeper on these guys or they're dead. And I actually think that's like insanely relevant.
Quite, because you do have to put the counter on Aatchik to be able to do the life loss.
Is that so?
Those are 2 separate lines. I stand corrected.
It doesn't say like then each opponent loses 1 life or anything. These are separate triggers. So that's a good call, by the way. As far as I know, a normal sweeper, like a deadly cover up, should deal 7 to your opponent or whatever, however many insects you have.
Those are definitely 2 separate lines.
So wow. And it's also important that it's not just like the tokens that this triggers on. It's just any insect that dies.
Yeah.
And so you might have other important insects. We just saw that 2 green mana 3/3 insect with reach.
Have the guy from Dustmourne that makes the 2 insects that have Death Touch if you have Delirium or whatever.
That guy. Yeah, that guy's great. So we saw a card in this set that's you cycle it to break an artifact or enchantment, but it's also like a pretty good creature in terms of stats, and it's an insect. So we incidentally we might be playing other good insects, but ultimately I just think like if all you're doing is filling your graveyard, self-milling, stuff like that, this is kind of a ridiculous reanimation target. I mean, I'd still probably go for like Valgaboth for the most part.
Maybe not even Reanimator, but hear me out. What if this is your backup plan in Insidious Roots?
Oh, yeah, because you're ramping into it.
And you're already putting a bunch of creatures in the yard or whatever anyway, so it's just like, all right, maybe they're getting rid of my Insidious Roots and I'm never getting more than like 1 thing off of it. But it's like, all right, well, I got 6 mana. Here's the 3/3 and like, I don't know, 7 1/1s or whatever.
Yeah, that's another place where that new snake, that Deathrite Shaman dupe comes into play, right? Because there's that guy, he's like 1 green mana, tap him, exile a card from your graveyard to make a mana. Well, that guy taps and he ramps this out. Tyvar can untap that snake so he can tap again, and so technically when you've got like 4 mana, you can play this guy. So yeah, you could just be ramping into mid play. There's multiple ways of doing it. So whether it's ramp or reanimation, like I actually think this dude has like way more play than it looks like at first glance. I just don't think people are really noticing that like that last ability is basically sweeper protection.
Yeah, I'm with
So
you.
good.
In those 2 decks, we're talking about just filling your yard to just have the bigger bodies. Like, this could be, again, your upper end card. Same thing, I think, for Insidious Roots. If you wanted 2 copies of this, so if you can't set up the roots or they've exiled them or whatever, it's like, all right, cool. Well, I'll just play this, and you still got to deal
Yeah.
with these like 8 creatures or
Yeah,
whatever.
beat this, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, seems great. And this last thing too, he's getting larger too. Like if your insects
yeah,
are dying, he's getting like he's gonna be like a 6/6, you know. So I don't know, not bad. But I think that have we reached your number one? Yes.
yes.
Yeah,
We're
we're here.
at the final card, and this is one where it started out where people went, yeah, no, yeah, and I think we're back to yeah on it now for a lot of people. But Brightglass Gearhulk. It is green, green, white, white for a 4/4 first strike trample. When this card enters, you can search your library for up to 2 artifact creatures and or enchantments with mana value 1 or less. Reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. I think this might end up being even better than we think it is.
Yep. Yep.
Just 4 mana, 4/4 first strike trample, and I get to search Llanowar elves, bats, whatever ridiculous thing I need to get out. Like, and it doesn't have to be a creature. It could be an artifact. It could be an
An
enchantment,
enchantment,
right?
yeah, it could be, you know, an unable to scream if you
Yeah.
want, you know, removal. It can be a Dusk Rose reliquary if you want
Yep.
some white removal, you
Especially
know.
if you're already doing the artifact thing, right? That's the
Exactly.
thing. There's a
Right.
bunch of good artifacts that cost 0 and 1 that
Yep.
might be worth playing.
Yeah, people are
So,
really underestimating how many good one drops there are,
and also
you know.
lots of uses in older formats, right? There are a
Oh yeah.
lot of those older format cards that are 0 to 2 mana. And if this is
The,
your upside or your top end, it's like, okay, cool. Now I go get my stuff that solves all these answers, right?
yeah, I mean, like it's more to cast than Trinket Mage, but it goes in more decks. It finds more things than Trinket Mage, and like I still say there are formats where like okay, going and getting your Skull Clamp is going to be like the most powerful thing you can possibly do. So people tend to forget that sometimes one drops are among the most powerful cards in the whole game. The number one complaint I've seen about this card when people do complain is that, yeah, it replaces itself with 2 cards. I mean, literally, it gets you card advantage, replaces itself with 2 cards, but it's only replacing itself with half the mana value.
Sure.
My retort is so.
Yeah, I'm okay
Who
with that.
cares? This can go and get oh god, why can't I remember the name of it right now? The enchantment, ethereal armor. This can go get ethereal armor. You know, we could sit here and name stuff it goes and gets. There's one drop artifacts, especially that might be important, like Ghost Vacuum, for instance. There's no end. And again, we've mostly been naming artifacts and enchantments. There's tons of one
But
drop
here's
creatures
the
you can
thing,
name,
right?
you
We
know?
will have a format where artifacts matter.
Yep.
And the bigger standard gets, the more artifacts there will be, the more things that will care about artifacts mattering. But think about the fact that this goes in decks with like Teething Wormlet,
Yeah, it
right?
goes
Where
and
you're
gets
just like, I
wormlet.
want another body, but I don't want to have fewer artifacts. Well, now I get an artifact and a body. Right? Like,
Yep, you can get your teething wormlet up to a 2/2 and gain a life, like right then and there if you've got up to 6 mana.
yeah.
But even if you know it just puts those cards in your hand and they remove your Gearhulk, it's like cool, you've still got plays. You got plays next turn. So
Mm-hmm.
wild to me. Wormlet's a good call. But there's really no end
And
to it.
again,
There's
I don't even know if it's just the searching that matters, but it's like there's decks that I've played for sure that look and go, man, how do I split the number of enchantments or artifacts, the number of creatures? And it's like, well, now I can just have both. And I don't have to sacrifice. I can just stay aggressive. And to be honest, a 4/4 first strike trample is pretty damn aggressive.
it's not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like,
I don't love like a 4 mana 4/4 anymore, but First Strike is such an underrated
oh,
ability.
sure.
First Strike is
Especially
so
against
good.
the opposing aggro decks. When you're talking about
Yeah.
the mono red or auras decks, where you're talking about delirium, like having that 4/4 first striker and anything else you have can
Yeah.
really stifle a big attack coming at you.
It's like another thing, like, yeah, you're spending 4 mana to get 2 one drops, but the one drops you go and get will be very important and they need to
Oh,
be
sure.
removed. It will probably cost more mana to remove the cards you go and get than it costs to cast them.
Well,
So
sometimes
in that way, you're getting mana value.
but I think sometimes you just want extra bodies, right? So being able to play it, then the next turn being able to drop like 3 things,
Yeah.
is pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, because like you said, it could be as many as three things. Like on the next turn, you drop a land, play your 2/1 drops, and you still have a 3 drop left over to
Yeah.
play. You know, like that's really good, man. Like even if all you're going and getting is Lawn War Elves, their body's on the table.
Or hell, just loading your
So
hand to reset after a sweeper, right? Okay, cool. Now we'll play another
yeah,
wormlet and something else,
yep. I
right?
was thinking that too. That like you can play this on 4 like into a Sunfall and kind of not care as much
Mm-hmm.
because like you went and you got 2 bodies. Like I'm prepared to answer this Sunfall now.
Yeah,
So yeah, man. I really do think this is one of the first cards we actually saw from the set way back when. I think people have had a chance to kind of forget about it now, which is a mistake.
sure.
Super upgraded trinket maids that goes and gets 3 different and card types, and 2 of those. It just
And
wow,
again, in a deck
that's
where
absolutely wild.
artifacts matter, there will be 1 mana artifacts you're probably playing that you can go get.
Even if this just goes and gets like a creature and a candy trail, like I'll take
Yeah.
that some of the time. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of we just saw that artifact yesterday. It's 1 black mana, and when it comes into play, a creature gets -2/-2.
You know what's
And
goofy
that's
about this? Like you could even go get what is it? The 1 green enchantment gives you +2/+0 trample when it goes to the yard, you draw a
a
card.
rancor. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Oh no, audacity.
yeah,
Right.
Audacity,
Sorry.
that's it.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
just go get that and put it on one of your other things that's already attacking.
Yeah, you can just do that. Hell, if
Like
you put it on your Brightglass Gearhulk, you got like a crawl worm with first strike and trample. You got like a 6/4 first strike trample.
yeah.
And if they ever actually kill it, then you draw a card. That's wild, dude. That's Audacity is a good call with this too.
yeah,
You
there's
can go get a Shard Mage's Rescue just to
mm,
keep it up, just to keep on
yeah,
5 mana.
yeah.
You can go get a Shard Mage's and dare them to cast a removal spell. Like that seems pretty good. So yeah, man, I 100% agreement on this. Yeah, fantastic Magic card here. It really is.
Well, there you
Um,
go. That's a lot for
uh,
people to sink their teeth into. We're either
mm-hmm.
crazy, maybe we're not, maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. Either way, let us know in the comments. Just don't be a jerk.
Yeah,
Hey,
try your absolute best
we
to
know
not be
we're
a jerk.
speculating on things early, right? So like we're gonna be right and wrong about no more than probably 50% of the cards on either side. But that's okay. Like
Yeah.
we're just giving you more information to make decisions with. That is
I've
all.
always said I do a top 10 sleepers in every
Hmm.
set. It's basically like another version of the underrated video, but I do a top 10 sleepers like every set. And I basically say that if I hit 2 of these, I'll be happy. You know what
Sure.
I mean? Like our rate doesn't necessarily have to be high for us to make some of the points that we're making. And we can't tell if anything's going to be good or bad before it comes out. Nobody knows because we can't see the future. But, on some of these, I think it's important to make points that maybe aren't being made by the majority of the community. And man, I hate to bring it up again, but Bright Glass, bro, you got some good points on Bright Glass, Bubba.
Well, why don't you everybody where they can find you when you're not hanging out with us?
Mostly I'm at my house. My address is no, I'm just kidding. I'm usually at the place, aka SBMTG. That is all you have to put into a YouTube search bar. But if you want to be a completionist, you can put in strictly better MTG, and my stupid face will pop up. We've done over 2,000 videos at this point. We're still rating 10 random magic cards every day on the Scryfall. We're doing top 10s. We're doing deck techs. We're doing previews. We do basically anything you can do in the realm of Magic the Gathering. So come stop by the channel, sub up, and do all the stuff.
Awesome. And y'all are already here, so all you gotta do is click the things that make the dings, as everybody's saying these days. So like go ahead and don't forget, like I said, if you want to support, I appreciate that as well. If you want to be a member here on the channel. And we're gonna have other videos coming up with what's overperforming, underperforming early after we get out of the early access stuff. So be sure
Yep.
to come back and check those videos out. Those are always popular. But as always, I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Dev, for being here. Y'all
You're
should go
welcome.
check out his channel if you haven't. You probably should if you're here. I mean, we have kind of the same taste in the same audience. Go over and
Honestly, yeah.
subscribe over there too. But as always, take care of yourselves. Remember to be awesome and be awesome to each other, especially these days.
Yeah, really.